Jeepers. Jeepers creepers.
We are back on YouTube.
Okay. Is it on the same link, or do people need to go to a new link?
People would need to go just to YouTube. I think if they just refresh YouTube, it's live on the St. John's YouTube. I-
Yeah, I see that we're up.
We are prepared for liftoff. I repeat, we are prepared for
But
liftoff.
we don't have any viewers according to the analytics, so people they're starting to get connected.
I'm still not seeing anybody on.
Well, I know this is live, so if you're joining us now, I think it must have been the abundance of St. John's people on our vMix that we had so many. We were too top heavy and we crashed the feed, or we just learned technology one day at a time, like the Lord intended. So to all three of you who have joined us live, and to our coffee hour guests, good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm just happy we made it through the service before that happened.
That is a wonderful thing, in fact.
Oh, 5 of you guys now.
I see that Jill is here, and she's come on back in. Good to see you, Jill. Let's see if we get any more. Okay. At this point, and apologies for getting everyone back up and running, but I think what probably likely happened is that when our YouTube feed crashed, most people logged off and thought, well, it's probably not coming back. So I'm going to say...
there's 9 of them now.
There are 9 of us here. Well, hold on. Let me not call the ball before we know what ball to call. Well, let's just continue. It'll be fun. It'll be the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 17 of us right now. That's more than 2 or 3 gathered in his name. So,
right.
You guys this can be like your little secret.
That's right, our secret conversation. So let's start off with the coffee hour question. We'll just jump right in. And Kylan, I'm going to go to you first because you've got the sunshiniest spot in all of the coffee hour, and so I want to be able to spend time with you on your porch or deck or wherever you are. And tell us, where is a time in your life where you had the courage and the faith and the hope to push through fear?
Yes, I am on my deck, and it's a beautiful morning, so I'm soaking it in since it's been so hot. Yeah, I'm not originally from Minnesota. I've been kind of all over the place, in fact. Been in Minnesota now for, I don't know, about 7 years or so. And so what I thought of was the times that I've moved, in particular the time that I moved to Minnesota. I was living in Boulder, Colorado, where I'm originally from, kind of out west. And we didn't want to move. And but, you know, it was a choice that we made. My husband was applying to law schools and ended up getting into the law school at the U of M. And we just thought this is an opportunity we can't pass up, and so we're gonna make this big move, and we're gonna do it. And we didn't know anybody over here. You know, we had hardly thought of Minnesota or the Twin Cities, and it was really scary. And I was not looking forward to it, to be honest. You know, we were kind of in our little bubble in Colorado, and I love the mountains, and so we just had kind of nestled in there and didn't really want to break out of that little bubble and go into this, you know, unknown world of Minnesota. And we didn't know anybody, didn't have any friends here. So I kind of thought of it like, all right, this is just another opportunity. Every time I've moved, I've enjoyed every place I've lived. We've made new friends, you know, new communities, all things like that. So, yeah. And then pretty much as soon as we got here, we're like, oh, okay, so they've got it going on. And here we are.
Yeah.
we got our house, and we're kind of here for good. So
I like that. I said at the outside service that I was reminded of a practice, and I can't remember who taught the practice, but it was a sort of a change practice on how to get through your own fear personally and making change in your life. And it was I joked that it's sort of a Midwestern practice because it had you outline the worst case scenario of what could happen, sort of in the spirit of it could be worse. But you would sort of say what the decision is and what you're trying, what will take courage and hope to push through. And then you would outline like what are the worst things that could happen as a result of this decision. And like by seeing them, it didn't minimize them, but it sort of put them in right size and help you make a decision, a realistic decision. And I think that you kind of described that, like sometimes you have to see things like in proportion, like it'll be okay, like you can do this. It gives you the courage.
yeah,
I'm also mindful of the decision St. John's made all the way back in 2012 when the marriage amendment was up for grabs, and St. John's had never made a public stance on hardly anything of, in terms of putting a banner out or putting things in the newspaper that we knew in living memory, at least. And it was a huge deal for the vestry to vote and to take a stand, to change our marriage policy, to be clear and demonstrable, and to be more firmly inclusive than we'd ever been. There was fear. There was fear that we might lose people, that we might offend people, that we might not be inclusive of those who disagreed. And yet it needed one person, especially on vestry, to speak up and to push through his fear and to count the cost of what might happen of speaking up. And that pushed us into decision making, into faith, hope, and courage. But it was that step of pushing through that really helped St. John's be bold. I want to go to you, Jenny or Bob, who are sharing. It's almost like we've got like arena side seats here, sportscasters. But will you tell us a story or an experience where somebody came through with faith, hope, and courage, or where you did?
Yeah, I think for me, coming to St. John's was actually a big act of faith, leaving the evangelical church I had attended with my friends throughout college and coming on my own and just trying to find something new and doing it because I wanted to be in a faith community that was pushing those boundaries and affirming all of our siblings. And yeah, it was really scary. The first time I came to St. John's was like August and there was no one here, and someone was like, everyone's at their cabin. Like, it's usually more full. And I was like, that's great. I'm new. I don't care if there's people. And then like 2 hours later, someone showed up at my dorm with bread. I was still like living in student housing, and someone literally showed up with bread from the St. John's bread ministry. And I was like, I think I found my people. And here we are.
That's awesome. The legacy of Ray Frisbee and the bread visitors alive and well. That's great. Bob, any stories that you would add on top of Jenny's story?
Yeah, if that mic will pick me up, I think we'll be okay. Oh, no, we can turn me up is what we can do. Boom. How about that? So my story is really echoey. Switching. Live technical difficulties, folks. All right. So my story is pretty similar to Nathan's, actually. Although before I touch on that, I do want to say it's interesting that you talked about the church's action in 2012, because one of the things when I was looking for housing in Minnesota when I first moved here, we were looking in 2012, and well, we were looking in 2013. Now that I think on it. But seeing the "You Are Welcome Here" and the rainbow flag that happened to be out in front of St. John's when we were looking at housing, and said, oh, this one's next to an Episcopal church, that's great, and saw that here, that was an extra sign that we thought that this could be a place for us at that time. So well done, St. John's. It had an immediate impact. And then, so my sort of story of courage and faith is when I was living in South Dakota and participating in lay Eucharistic ministry there, as I had here at St. John's. It wasn't COVID, right? It was 2015, 2016, but some of the people that we would take communion to were in hospital and either were in an immunocompromised situation, so you'd have to mask and gown up to go in to provide communion, or they might have had something particularly infectious and you had to mask and gown up and go in. And so fairly similar to Nathan's story, so I don't really need to repeat all those feelings, but just knowing that I was going in to share communion with someone, and particularly with someone who wasn't necessarily getting a lot of human contact. Their family might have been in there with them because they were there already, and any exposure was already covered that way. So it wasn't, I would even say, quite as bad as during pandemic times when even family couldn't necessarily go and visit patients. But yeah, just knowing that I was helping to bring faith into that space, I think was what helped me have the courage and love to go and do that.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Jenny, as well. And I want to give our preacher of the day a chance to share another thought if he has one. And Nathan, I joked outside and maybe I did at the beginning, but this is one of like 3 or 4 times you've ever set foot in St. John. So welcome to the building, and thank you for your sermon today. But I'm wondering if you have a story beyond what you preached today, or a thought on courage, pushing through fear.
Yeah, there's 2 that are really present to my mind right now. Back in, I think, 2016, Philando Castile was killed by police in St. Paul, and I was in seminary, and I was pretty active at that point already with clergy support for Black Lives Matter and racial justice organizers. And I was actually in Canada for a church conference on the week that he was killed, but I came back on Saturday and went from the plane to the protest, basically. And it was a particular scary one. It was probably the scariest one that I've ever been a part of, with the army, just this army of policemen, the flashbang grenades, the smoke and the gas, and dogs, all of that. And I had this really profound experience where I just kind of planted my feet there, and I said that I'm willing to endure whatever I have to endure so that this never happens again. And it was like peace just from my head to my toe, kind of like planted me, rooted me in the ground. All that fear and anxiety just lifted. It was such a beautiful thing for me. I'll never forget it. The other thing that I'm thinking of, one of my roles as a chaplain is to be an advocate for people that maybe aren't having their voices heard, or maybe being overlooked. Maybe they're experiencing stigma because of poverty or race or other issues from other providers. And I'll forever be a poor country boy from Oklahoma, and so the healing and the growth and the kind of the gymnastics that I have to go through sometimes to remember that I've actually been formally trained, I'm overly qualified, I'm called, and I trust my instinct and my heart and what I hear and what I see. And I can speak truth to power. I can speak, I can hold the system or a colleague, to account for not overlooking these really important people. That's been a really profound area of growth for me these past several years. And I'm especially proud that I've leaned into that so much that I can do it with grace and in a way that doesn't, cause a boundary or cause an experience of expulsion from that provider who may have overlooked something, may have made a mistake. So it's like I'm growing, the sense of faith and courage is growing. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Beautifully said too. Wow. You got more stories than a preacher ought to, Nathan. This is good. You're loaded, and they're good stories. Um, Thank you for bringing the good word today, and for bringing that sense of standing firm in your conviction. Um, I see we still have folks with us, which is great, and I want to give both Richard and Jude a chance, and Craig too. But maybe we'll go first to Craig, and then we'll go to Jude, and we'll give Richard the last word, as we often do.
No, you can give it to Craig. I mean, Richard. You can
Thank
give
you.
Richard the last spot.
Thank you, Jared. I'm not sure if my sound is working this week. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Well, I really appreciate Nathan's sermon, and thank you for naming that tricky boundary between disgust and exclusion, and thinking about genders and races and sexualities, ages, abilities, ethnicities, etc. I think one other aspect, just in my own life as an immigrant, has been navigating a system that for now 20 years, I arrived in this country when I was 19, and I've lived in this country trying to survive an incredibly xenophobic system over 20 years. And what has helped me, through my fear, to come to a place of hope and courage and real trust in God's love, opening ways that have been closed, making changing never into nevertheless, has been really this faith community at St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church, as well as St. John the Baptist Episcopal Church in Linden Hills. That this faith community has supported me steadfastly in my ministry as a priest, helping me, with all of the people who have loved and cared for me as I've had to jump over these hurdles and through these hoops. So I'm grateful for that, and it is community. It's praying together. It's celebrating the mysteries of Christ in sacramental liturgies together. It's serving together. It's studying and worshiping together that has sustained me and given me that faith and courage. So, thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Craig. Thank you for modeling courage as a leader in our faith community. I'm looking at the YouTube comments, and Jill Thompson writes, "Not fear, but childlike fantasy. I always thought you bought a house when, quote, Prince Charming carried you over the threshold." She said, "But I bought my first house in 1995, no Prince Charming then, and new worlds opened." And I love that that image of stepping out and doing things independently. I know there are other members of the faith community who have experienced that, even recently, buying a first home and doing it alone. That's fantastic. Yeah, exactly. It's not easy. It takes courage. And speaking of homes and houses and roofs over our head, I do want to say, before we turn to Richard, you may have seen the announcement on this Friday that we are in our last week where there is no in the building worship. This coming Sunday at 8 a.m., you are invited to turn up as you are for an 8 o'clock service, which will be in the main part of the church so that we can spread out as needed. Today, some of the media team are staying late to begin working out the kinks of what it would take to do a 10 o'clock service in a streaming hybrid and in-person fashion. And so we'll have details on that hopefully later in this coming month. But we know for sure that the 8 o'clock ongoing will be indoors and the 9 o'clock outdoors until such a time as we are offering a hybrid 10 o'clock, at which point we will cease offering the 9 o'clock outdoors. So be watching for more details about that, but please do consider showing up. If you haven't been in the church in a long time, which most of us haven't, we'd love to see you here for the 8 o'clock and not too long out. I know some of you are really eager for the 10 o'clock. We'll be able to offer that as well in the summertime is our hope. But stay tuned for details. Richard, you get the final word because Jude has ceded his turn.
Well, so just a really, really great conversation we've had this morning. I think I'll kind of do something similar as what Kylan kind of mentioned about moving. My family, Nathan, is also from not Oklahoma, but from another area in the South, South Carolina, and so my dad's family is all there, and they are still all there. But my different chapters of life, education You know, for example, coming here to move to Minnesota to become the music director here has provided me with a lot of moves geographically in the country. Starting at a really early age, I think you know, one of the earliest memories of a fear that I overcame due to the love and support of family, extended family and friends was leaving home at 14 to go away to high school in Maryland. And you know, that was tough because it was really young. But you know, I knew it was in the best interest. I knew my family had that, you know, for something like that for me to do. And you know, I've had cousins do the same thing and siblings. And so I think eventually, like each other time I moved, like for college or graduate school or things, and then here, it became easier. And it was, but also, you know, there's still the element of leaving things and people behind and going to something new. But I've always very much appreciated the opportunities to just be around so many wonderfully um, uh, engaging different people, and just, you know, having them become a part of my life. And so yeah, it's the I don't know, but I thought I'd bring that up. I think I mean another thing I will say is I'll say it from a music standpoint. A fear is for those of us who are musicians and have performed, there is that performance anxiety fear that you have to get over. But just remembering that you have the support of people who are there and want to hear you, not to judge you musically. But yeah.
That's beautifully said, Richard. And you're absolutely right. There are so many ways. It's not even just performing. I think of you know, Nathan's role today, or a reader who steps in front, or an acolyte who has to lead in procession for the first time. That those roles that we take on to lead put us in front, and that it requires a certain amount of courage. And leadership always involves some risk, I think, when we do it, whether it be as acolyte or as preacher or as musician, because we risk messing up, we risk making the wrong choice, turning in the wrong direction. But thank you for naming that riskiness, and then also the naming of the new possibilities of community that are formed when we do risk those boundary crossing moments of being loving. Friends, I noticed that the hour is past and upon us to wrap things up, and I just want to say thank you, those of you that found us again for Coffee Hour. Thank you to all gathered here. And a special thank you again to our preacher of the day, Nathan. I hope you all will be back next week for our next installment of Summer Preaching Series. And we'll see you here in worship at 10, or out in the parking lot at 9, or in the church at 8. See you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care, y'all.
Thanks to you who
Peace and
stayed.
blessings.